tomorrow is the first day of one type of Bharatiya New Year. And I like to use this pretext to also once again and forever pass on my best wishes for everybody. So it is Happy New Year, because in India we begin a new year twice, 2 times in a year. Both are officially accepted measurements of time in India. One is what we call as Shake, which is based on movements of moon, Chandra. It's called Chandra Kala Ganana. Even under the constitutional scheme, we have accepted these 2 measurements of time. Both are the counts for India's year, New Year. So what begins tomorrow with Gudi Padwa is Shake, Happy New Year. Another start is what is called as Vikram Samvat. And that is based on the movement of sun. That's called Saura Kala Ganana. And Vikram Samvat begins during Diwali period. After Diwali, the new Vikram Samvat. By and large, Shake is approximately 70 years less than the ongoing, this is Christian era. The world that has accepted, when we say the year is 2018, basically it is 2018 of the Christian era. But by and large, the world has accepted this as a universal calendar. Shake would mean 2018 minus 78. So Shake is supposed to have begun somewhere in 78 AD. And nobody knows exact reason or the historical background. Why is it called Shalivahan Shake? So who is this Shalivahan? Is this one of the most illustrious emperors of the Satvahan dynasty, who is predominantly in South India? How come it got accepted all over India? You think of India in 78 AD, you have Kanishka as the most powerful emperor in the northern part, with his capital at Peshawar, then known as Purushapur. We don't really know. Similarly, Vikram Samvat is the current Christian era plus 58. So whoever is this Vikramaditya, which generally Indian rulers took this as a great honorary title for them. I'm expecting most of you to know and remember Chandragupta II, who is also known as Vikramaditya, and his regime was from 375 AD to 415 AD. That is considered as a golden age of ancient India by everybody except leftist historians. Now that they have their freedom of expression, no problem. But by and large, there is a general agreement that this was 4th, 5th and 6th century is ancient India's golden age. But who was Vikramaditya around 58 BC? There is no idea. But nothing should stop me from extending best wishes for tomorrow, because as it is, we are not meeting tomorrow. So like Happy New Year for everybody. Now get ready for a fascinating look at what is really called as the heart and soul of Indian Constitution. Together, they are called as heart and soul of the Indian Constitution. That is fundamental rights and directive principles. And also get ready to see the fascinating, gripping and engrossing and enlightening, whatever adjective I use, it pales into insignificance in the light of what happened with fundamental rights and directive principles at the center. All 3 pillars of India's democracy, not only that they revolve, but at times there is a struggle. The struggle of legislature versus judiciary and executive versus judiciary. And in fact, legislature and executive on one side versus judiciary, a really, truly gripping struggle. This single story will actually explain almost entire constitution, the constitutional method of functioning as it came to be shaped. We have an ambitious plan for the day, because actually my personal notes run into 4 pages. And for last 11 sessions, 10 sessions, I have been able to finish the first half page. So this is a plan for next 8 sessions, during which we are supposed to be completing our study of the Constitution. I don't know how I am going to fare. But this is not a limited overs match. And I would like to think that none of us, we are under any compulsion to complete so many runs in so many overs. This is a test match. And then I am Rahul Dravid. As long as that classical batting goes on. But let's try, let's see. Because with all this ambitious plan, we still have to complete some important points about legislature and executive. I know for sure that when we start with fundamental rights and directive principles, everyone is going to realize why we spend so much of time, in fact, trying to understand the broad contours of the Constitution, the features, and then focus on legislature and executive before we start getting into these details. But I promise you the story is gripping. I find it fascinating. As I would keep repeating these words. You must remember me using the same terms while explaining the functioning of the Constituent Assembly. I find this study truly gripping. And deeper you understand, more you understand, you begin to see the real India and how modern India came into being. So some important points about legislature and executive are still required. For example, my personal second most favorite definition of democracy. And what a wonderful definition it is. The best definition of democracy, of course, comes from Abraham Lincoln. His famous Gettysburg speech, a barely 3-minute speech to celebrate turning point of American Civil War. Until then, the Unionists, or Northerners as they are called, were actually suffering setbacks. And the separatists, who had already declared partition and breakaway of United States of America, the Southerners, they were advancing and registering victories. But with Gettysburg, the turning point is achieved. It's nearer to Washington, D.C. right now. So Abraham Lincoln decided to address the army over there. And the speech is barely 3 minutes, less than 3 minutes. You can actually recite the speech. In those 3 minutes, he reminds his soldiers of why we are fighting. One classic term from this speech is without fear or favor for anybody and malice for none. That why are we fighting? It's almost like nirvaira sarva bhuteshu, that we are doing our duty, and this is with malice towards none. And neither favor nor fear of anyone, and malice towards none. The words are almost poetic. And then he explained that the United States of America then accepted bloody civil war and also paid a heavy price to maintain the unity of the Union. That was Lincoln's first commitment. That I will not let the unity of the Union suffer. And unity as a democratic polity. So he makes it clear that we are fighting for democracy. That's why he defined democracy in that speech. That continues to be the best definition according to many experts, because the definition is that democracy is government by the people, for the people, of the people. Such simple words, but deeper you think about all the words, the whole meaning of democracy goes on becoming clearer and clearer. If you miss even one of them, then it is not true democracy. For the people, of the people, and by the people. simple sounding prepositions, but each one draws such extraordinary meaning that it is also government by the people, which means people elect. It is legislature. It is government of the people, that is sovereignty of the people gets enshrined. And government for the people will mean what is the task of this institution called government, which is executive, welfare, people's welfare, development. So it is government. But all three are required. Sometimes there can be government for the people, but it can be dictator. So it's not government by the people, and so on, all permutation combinations. Such simple words, keep thinking for the rest of the evening, tonight, and for the rest of your life, as long as you continue study, which I would like that to be for the rest of your life. I know that you will keep thinking of and you'll keep realizing ever newer meaning of the simple term. Democracy is government by the people, for the people, of the people. And then comes what is, according to me, the second, it's my favorite. My second most favorite. There are so many political pundits, and they have written treatise after treatise on democracy, and some of them in simple terms, some of them in very difficult jargon and all. And as a part of our study, we have to keep studying that and keep enjoying that, of course. But across all of them, this one I pick up as my personal second most favorite definition, that is, democracy is government by debate. That democracy is government by debate. Just apply this one, and you will begin to understand elections after all. Elections define a non-violent method of power struggle. You will see that in absence of democracy, in fact, power struggle is bound to turn violent, because there is no other way of peaceful transfer of power. And of course, no other way to articulate people's will. But here is democracy. The candidates may contest. All they have to do basically and essentially is convince people. They would like to convince with arguments and programs and promises and performance and all. Yes, it is a downside that money and muscle power plays a role, and this even form democracy is not the ideal and certainly not the perfect form. Every political thinker has always been aware of innate limitations of democracy. There is a very fine essay on democracy by E.M. Foster. He used a beautiful term which was also then repeated by Winston Churchill. The fine description is, and that was the title of the essay, the description is 2 cheers for democracy. A Western way of cheering. And a normal method is to say 3 cheers for anything. Hippie hooray, hippie hooray, hippie hooray. But these thinkers make 2 cheers for democracy. What it means is they are aware of the limitations. It's not like this is an ideal form. Maybe the evolution of political institutions also is going on, and the humanity is working on itself, and we still have to work. It is unfinished work. Democracy is still unfinished work. It is a work in action. It is work in progress. So nobody should claim that it's like the perfect form. Churchill also described the same in different words, but in typical, I would call it quintessential Churchillian way. Churchill says, democracy is the worst form of government, except that there is no better one available. So yes, the way elections turn out to be, and winning becomes more important than anything else. So there is an element of deception, and yes, black money, and in India it would be caste and community factors, but that's all over. This way it manifests in democracy everywhere. To say the least, under democracy, all parties, all candidates need money. And has democracy come up with any idea about how do you ensure that white and proper legal money is used for elections? How do you ensure that there are no favors exchanged in return for money? Let me come to government and I will do this for you, that I will misuse my power. Use or misuse? How do you pinpoint that misuse? The question of election funding is a major question before election. There is no justification for corruption, but unfortunately, corruption in election is a universal phenomenon. So we need to work on it, yes. But even as I am aware of Indian democracy, I am still proud of Indian democracy. And even as I am aware of limitations and restrictions on democracy as a form, I would still go for democracy and keep working for further evolution and think of political institutions. But look at this beautiful definition, and all limitations notwithstanding, again the beauty of the way it works out. Democracy is government by debate. Actually, once you understand this, all points we saw yesterday, for example, you will find this definition as a magnet around which, like a magnetic field, all points of democracy organize themselves. You understand this? Democracy is government by debate. Okay. So what are elections? And all said and done, finally, the candidates and the parties have to convince people, finally. What a beautiful thing. And however powerful a political leader is, in Indian setup, at least once in every 5 years, the leader has to become polite, confront people. I think many of you have already heard me say this, and the sentence has to be said in Marathi. ताई माई अक्का माझ्यावर मारा शिक्का. आणि all puns intended. ही खूण मी जाणीवपूर्वक करतो, ह्याची जाणीव करून देतो. हे नुसता चुकूनची नाही आहे. हे नीट नम्रतेने, ताई माई किती पॉवरफुल असू द्या, किती तुम्ही बारामती, Kamalnath's constituency was Chhindwara, or Chandrasekhar was a guaranteed winner from Balia constituency, and you go on doing this, so on and so forth. However powerful you are, you have to face people. I find that beautiful. It is empowering for a common man. And the common man understands the value. It is only an educated middle class which unfortunately does not turn up for voting, thinks that politicians can win the election and then vanish for 5 years. The reality is they don't. The reality is they can't, because if they vanish for 5 years after winning the election, in the next election people will ensure that they vanish forever. Politicians know that they have to keep meeting people. They have to be at the beck and call of people. And there is no schedule for a politician. There is no time when people would think that this is not the time to call up a politician. People may call up at 3 a.m. and tell them that the dustbin on the corner of my road has not been cleared. What nonsense are you doing? Is this why we voted for you? I must tell you, this is a beauty of democracy. So the whole process of election is by debate. By debate. All said and done, caste, muscle power and money. Okay? I will still say that caste, muscle power and money still cannot alone ensure victory for the candidate. Every now and then in Indian setup also the voters have proven again and again that the voters are intelligent, and voters have capacity to rise above casteist considerations or communal considerations and money, etc. You pour in as much money. At a point of time, Naval Tata had contested election from southern Mumbai also, please remember, because it's all rich area, and he had poured in as much money as he wanted, but he couldn't win the election. So it's not money alone can't win the election. Muscle power alone can't win the election. A suitable caste, considering India's, I call unfortunate socio-political reality, but still the factor is, even if you have the suitable caste which is favorable given the politics of that state or that constituency, even these three factors alone cannot ensure victory for you unless the voter is convinced about the work you have done, about your track record, whatever they expected, so all notwithstanding. Democracy is government by debate. And then people elect the legislature, okay? I hope yesterday's point fall in line like a magnetic field, that everything we saw, come on, democracy is government by debate, that the elected representatives can ask any question to the executive. And there is a methodology laid down. So in a particular recommended format, the question goes to legislature secretariat. It is forwarded to the ministry. Ministry is executive, so it is answerable. There is a time limit, and with all our nonsense of time, I'm not calling it sense of time. What India as a collective entity today has nonsense of time. Unfortunately and sadly, and for me angrily also, we are not punctual people. But see how the system performs. Because the question hour is set. The day when that ministry's questions are going to be taken up is set. And even if the party has 2/3 majority, even if the minister and the speaker belong to the same party, the minister still knows that the minister is answerable to the legislature. And if his ministry does not reply on time, he will be held responsible. Not the bureaucrats alone, please remember. Bureaucracy also has been considered as a part of executive in India, but finally in democracy, those who are held responsible are elected representatives and ministers. Whether they are good character people at personal level or not, whether they are punctual people or not, none of it just doesn't matter. Here is a question. The legislature secretary decided that this would be a starred question. So, okay, get the answer ready, send it on time, the booklet will be ready, it will be circulated and given over in the bins of every elected representative. Then enter question hour. Mr. Speaker, sir, question number 1217. The minister has to be present and has to stand up and then address Mr. Speaker, sir, answer as printed. And then the whole issue is open for all debate. Any member can ask any question and the minister is expected to be ready. Democracy is government by debate. Then question hour ends and some matter of urgency and importance has come up. It can't wait the normal routine. Any issue can be brought up at the 0 hour. Government by debate. Throughout the course of the functioning of the houses, there is call attention, there is point of order, there is 30-minute discussion, there is 2-hour discussion. The speaker has the authority to order the ministers. All democracy is government by debate. I hope all meaning of division of power and principle of checks and balances begins to be crystal clear. Independent India's first ever speaker was a great freedom fighter and the member of Congress party, that was Dada Saheb Mavlankar. So after independence, India's first Sansad Lok Sabha came into existence. That was 1952. And Dada Saheb Mavlankar became the speaker. He resigned from even the primary membership of Indian National Congress. In doing so, he actually laid down a great tradition, a precedent, pratha. Because Dada Saheb Mavlankar said that the speaker has to be above all party considerations. And nobody should be able to even point a finger towards speaker and the impartiality of the speaker. So the freedom fighter that he was, a genuine, committed, selfless Gandhian that he was, wearing khadi all the time. And he wasn't there for politics and post. I also personally believe that the great person also rose to a great height and created great precedents for all speakers to follow and for all politics to follow. That once you become a speaker, he even resigned from primary membership of Congress so that nobody can say that after all you are a Congress person, That's why you are taking these decisions. Then at a point of time, Prime Minister Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru sent a message to Dadasaheb Mavlankar that Nehru would like to meet him at such and such a place, the Prime Minister's office, at such and such a time, on such and such a day. Now Nehru, in his own capacity, a great leader, the unquestioned leader of Congress, especially after Gandhiji, and unfortunately again especially after Sardar Patel also passed away in 1950. Nehru's stature was unquestionable. So he issues that he summons Dadasaheb Mavlankar when he was the Speaker of Lok Sabha. And then Dadasaheb Mavlankar, in his typical style, in typical Gandhian style also, replied that, Mr. Prime Minister, you don't get to call me. If required, I will call you, and as per the time given by me, you will be present there. Because executive is answerable to legislature. And Prime Minister, as head of government, is the highest head of executive in Indian constitutional scheme. Speaker is the highest head of legislature. So Prime Minister cannot summon the Speaker. It's the other way around. The Speaker can summon. And again, true to the hardcore Democrat that Nehru also was, plus as a person, a large-hearted person, he tendered his apology and he said, I'm sorry, what you are saying is right. And accordingly, Nehru called on Dadasaheb Mavlankar. Democracy is government by debate. Such a legislature, therefore, has the protection of privileges. And we were there yesterday. What we did not touch upon yesterday is the role and functions of the upper house. So the concept of bicameral legislature. The founding fathers made a conscious decision of having a bicameral, I should not say actually having, but continuing bicameral legislature at the center. There already was Rajya Sabha. It was then called as Council of States. And there already was, in earlier form, it was the Legislative Council, Viceroy's Council, which turned into Lok Sabha, and accordingly elections happened. So there is bicameral legislature. When it comes to the states, the Constitution has left that decision to the legislative assemblies of the states. That is, it is for the state to decide whether that state would like to have a bicameral legislature or a unicameral legislature. So accordingly, after independence, almost all of the states which had bicameral legislature made a conscious decision of doing away with the Legislative Council, Vidhan Parishad. So as of today, there are 7 states which have bicameral legislature. Maharashtra is one of them, and at the end of the day, I am personally convinced of the efficacy of bicameral legislature. One is directly elected from among people, that generally comes to be colloquially referred to as lower house. And in Indian setup, the other one will be indirectly elected through elected representatives. At the central government level, it comes to be called, at the union level, it is Rajya Sabha, at the state level, it is Vidhan Parishad. All bills have to go to both houses. All bills other than money bill can be introduced in either of the houses and the discussion can continue. It's only that money bill has to be introduced in a directly elected house. So at Lok Sabha at the union level and Vidhan Sabha at the state level. All of it. Democracy is government by debate and answerability to people. All resolutions other than constitutional amendments. Then the upper house can at best reject the resolution and send it back to the lower house. After that, the lower house has a couple of options. Take the wishes of the elders. Actually, the upper house has also come to be known as elders. So the task of the lower house will be to take the wishes and observations of the elders into consideration, suitably modify the original resolution, law, statute, amendment, whatever it was, then pass it in new form and send it again to the upper house. But the lower house also has the constitutional authority to pass it as it is. If lower house chooses that, then the upper house has no choice but to pass it. And then through Council of Ministers, it will go to the President again. And their President's powers and duties have been defined. But when it comes to constitutional amendment, then both houses have to separately pass it. India just saw that in form of GST. The upper house is supposed to be repository of experience. So one role of upper house is that the lower houses are elected from among people, and then everyone is aware that elections are kind of a different ball game altogether. So sometimes more studied people, more experienced people, people with true genuine commitment to the country, etc., whose experience is required for the country, may not win the election. So the democracy creates this arrangement available that, okay, in that case, they can be co-opted, adopted, elected in the upper house so that the country benefits from their experience. It's not like everyone can run Chanakya Mandal. Arun Jaitley had lost parliamentary election from Amritsar constituency in May 2014. Now, it's not only a political matter. That it has turned out to be political is a different matter, but that's how democracy behaves. But he's a constitutional lawyer, a deeply well-studied person, and the party has every right to think that his experience is required for running the government. So he's there on Rajya Sabha and becomes perhaps the second most powerful minister in Narendra Modi's cabinet. And the examples could just continue. Same for the state. You will also see that sometimes lower house, that is respectively Lok Sabha or Vidhan Sabha, behaves in a party political fashion. And sometimes the quality of debate in lower houses may not be up to the mark. Or also the behavior of the members in the lower houses also may be well short of like people's expectations or their duties and all. But by and large, the quality of debate in the upper houses. In terms of power, the so-called upper houses are less powerful as compared to the lower houses. But the quality input, policy input, the debate that goes on, so experience, slowing down the process. Sometimes it is required, please remember, for a vehicle to run properly, brakes are required. Upper house acts like a brake. Imagine there were only one house consisting of the representatives elected directly. Then it's not a feature of only India, this is a global feature that elections happen on some sort of a sentimental or a wave pattern. A wave pattern. Sometimes there is anti-incumbency factor and people are so angry with the government in power that all they want to do is punish them. Therefore, what is called as negative voting takes place. That people vote somebody to power, not because they want that person to rule, but they are sure that we don't want this person and party. Now we are fed up with it. They have been ruling for what? Last 25 years. Enough of communists. We will return BJP to power this time and see how they perform. And if they don't, we will change them again. So there is anti-incumbency factor. There is negative voting. And then imagine that on a certain sympathy wave, something suddenly the national security is in trouble. And let's say some terrorist actions have happened, or Pakistan is getting ready to attack, or China did some nonsense, and on that wave, suddenly people decide to vote a particular party to power. 1984 was a year full of turmoil and all kinds of dangers to India's unity. Terrorism in Jammu Kashmir began to explode decisively from 1984. Jammu Kashmir Liberation Front. The Khalistan movement was on. The almost entire northeast was up in flames. And troubles at so many places, possible caste wars, unsettled atmosphere over policy of reservations and all. The whole country was on a boil. I remember the days. And it's on this dangerous background that Indira Gandhi was assassinated on October 34, 1984. The country went to elections in November. That is known as sympathy wave. And there was a massive sympathy wave which ensured that Rajiv Gandhi gets 415 seats in a house of 523. Man, almost 80% seats. Why almost? I mean, 80% of the seats. Had there been only unicameral legislature, mind you, then now the government will have such unbridled power to change anything and everything, etc. The so named or so-called basic structure doctrine notwithstanding, he has 80% of MPs over there. The scene in Lok Sabha can change overnight. Lok Sabha and Vidhan Sabha have a defined tenure of 5 years, while the upper houses are continual houses. There is no tenure for the house. There is a tenure for MPs in Rajya Sabha, or MLCs as they are called. There is a 6-year tenure. And 1/3 members will retire once every 2 years. But the house is always there. So because of a particular political atmosphere in a country, the lower houses may see a sweeping change in the power structure. If there were only unicameral legislature, then such a newly elected legislature will be entrusted with, I would call that as unbridled power. Some restrictions are required on that power. In such a situation, actually the upper house, Rajya Sabha and Vidhan Parishad respectively, may act as that brake. Because the scene in Rajya Sabha is not going to change at the pace at which scene in Lok Sabha or Vidhan Sabha could change. BJP won Lok Sabha in May 2014. But NDA and BJP did not have majority in Rajya Sabha for last 4 years. So there is a process of slowing down. When it comes to GST, because it was constitutional amendment, therefore it was constitutionally mandatory that it had to be passed in Rajya Sabha, and then Congress made politics out of it and ensured that it is not passed. So on this particular issue, there is reason to say that that may not have been in favor of the country. But this process of slowing down, and then politicians and government should remember that there is another house and this bill has to go there. And even if it is not the constitutional amendment bill, the upper house still has authority to express opinions and return the bill, which is not okay for democracy, which is not dignified. So the lower house has to take that into consideration. I believe in the light of the nature of elections, and that nature of election also is defined by the nature of we, the people. We are human beings. Please remember, whatever we may claim that we are rational animals, that was what Plato said. I agree 100% with him for 50% of the part. Well, I agree that man is animal. I'm not sure about the rational factor. We respond in emotional way. It's not always rational. So suddenly Indira Ji was assassinated right in her home. And here is Mr. Clean, the handsome one, who just lost his mother, but he is swallowing his sorrow and still facing it because, come on, so there is a huge sympathy wave in favor of Rajiv Gandhi, and that just goes on happening. Nobody denies that a major factor in Kennedy's victory in the presidential election of 1960 was his handsome looks. Don't be under the impression that it's only women who voted for him. Women did vote for him. But we are, as human beings, we are like impulsive people. And the political system gets defined by the behavior of such individuals. So there has to be something, some in positive sense of the term, some slowing down. I am personally convinced about the efficacy of the second house. So bicameral legislature acts as a brake on possible sweeping changes had there not been a bicameral legislature. And then look at the electoral behavior. I wonder whether our constitution would have survived. And there would have been this ongoing tussle of legislature and executive on one side versus the judiciary. Then the legislative functioning is also defined by the provision for various committees. That is because the full house may be 543 members in Lok Sabha or 288 in Maharashtra Vidhan Sabha, so to say. It's practically not possible for all respectively 543 and 288 to sit together and deliberate on all matters. So there have to be committees. They are empowered committees. They are legislative committees. For example, probably the most important committee is what is called as the Business Advisory Committee. That is headed by the Speaker. And then apart from the Speaker, equal number of members from the ruling party and the opposition party are supposed to be there on the Business Advisory Committee. The numbers are always expected to be odd numbers, odd. So like it's 11, 13, 15, 17. Behind all functioning of the respective legislature, it is the Business Advisory Committee that is supposed to sit together in advance and plan the business of legislative functioning. So each given day and the question hour, then 0 hour, and then what is the scheduled business. There may be actually a din in the house, and there may be government Murdabad and so Jindabad and so resign, and the Rajadanda may be captured by somebody, and in the process the constitution may fall down, giving some pretext for somebody to argue that these people insulted Baba Saheb Ambedkar. The transactions are kept aside, and this on what I would actually call as like questionable issues, non-issues, etc. Instead of discussing the business of the house, the whole discussion is like wavered on rather crass, naked, power political issues. Have you ever wondered about then how does the functioning go on? The reason is pretty simple. That the Business Advisory Committee had already met in advance. The agenda was prepared and it is there. And then when the House begins to function, the authority is with the Speaker. So now the budget for the year 2018 is to be finally to be passed. It is mid-March. Based on that, rest of the states also have to finalize their budgets, and this budget has to go into action from 1st of April. So whatever gondhal that goes on, the Speaker has the authority. So even in all kinds of shouting and din, the budget gets passed. It is put to vote, the business is put to vote, the shouting may go on, but the Speaker quietly goes on saying, this is put to vote, ayes, raise your voices. Nays, raise your voices. Then he declares, ayes have the vote, ayes have the vote, ayes have the vote. And it enters the official record. Official record does not talk about the din that is going on. If later on you read the official record, you will think that all members of the House were meditating at that point of time. But this again is a beauty of the functioning. This is government by debate. So the Business Advisory Committee is important. Another one is what is called as Public Accounts Committee. This also is a high-powered legislative committee with all authority to go into every single pie spent in public life. So the Public Accounts Committee. In fact, the Public Accounts Committee is always headed by a member of the opposition. AG, Auditor General of a state, prepares the report, the financial report of the functioning of government, including public sector undertakings. But AG at the state level and CAG at the union level. At the union level, it's Comptroller and Auditor General. We are going to go into details later on. But their reports go to PSC first. It is again executive, responsible, answerable to legislature, because all these AGs and CAGs are executive. They watch the spending of public money under the government. And their job is to see whether all expenditure is as per what was sanctioned in the budget. Again, please remember that the term sanctioned in the budget means executive's answerability to the legislature. Expenditure is actually incurred by the executive. But executive is required to be permitted by the legislature. Therefore, the budget has to come in front of the legislature. Unless the legislature permits, not 1 rupee can be spent in public life. Government will come to a grinding halt. And once the legislature permits the expenditure, then executive has to commit that expenditure accordingly and come back to the legislature reporting that we have incurred the expenditure as you have stated. That process is supposed to be watched by this independent authority, the constitutional one called CAG and AG. But they are executive, so the report has to go to the legislature. PSC, it's Public Accounts Committee. AG's report is first placed before PSC. PSC has the power to summon AG and CAG. PSC also has a power to summon the finance minister and put the questions. Then PSC confirms. Only after PSC has confirmed that the AG reports are tabled in the concerned house. So there is Public Accounts Committee. Similarly, there is Estimates Committee to go into various estimates as the title suggests. There is also an important one, the Assurance Committee, mind you. Assurance Committee monitors all assurances made by the ministers on the floor of the house. Be careful about this term, on the floor of the house. Minister says something outside the house will not fall within the purview of the Assurance Committee. But some discussion is on, and the minister stands up in the house and assures the house, Mr. Speaker, sir, Adhyaksh Mahoday, मैं आपसे वादा करता हूँ, आपको वचन देता हूँ, I assure you that this is, then it goes into the record. And it is followed whether it is done or not. If the assurance made by a certain minister on the floor of the assembly, of the house, is not followed, that may amount to breach of privilege. Because speaking the truth in the house is the privilege of the house. If at the end of the day, some member is found to have lied on the floor of the house, that will also attract action under breach of privilege. Because man, you lied to the house. Yes, you are protected from any legal action against whatever you say or do, but this is called behavior unbecoming of an elected representative. There is a code of conduct. Speaker is the authority, but Speaker can take up any issue if the Speaker is convinced that this particular behavior of the member of the house is unbecoming of an elected representative. So standing on the floor of the house and saying something which was false, not that it turned out to be false, but that there was a reasonable reason for even that person to know that what he or she is speaking is false, then the person is held on a short leash. That is all monitored by Assurance Committee. There are many other committees which I will leave for your further studies and then our Q&A as and when it comes up. Apart from, these are all called standing committees. Now, reason they are all called standing committees because they are inbuilt into the legislative functioning and they are always there. काय माझी गाडी आली असेल? हाच ना? काय सांगायचं? थांबायला सांगायचं काय फार no big deal. These are all called standing committees because they are defined in the rules of business for functioning of the house. But sometimes the house can choose to appoint a high power committee, HPC as they are called, a high power committee. It's not always that there is an arrangement for all standing committees. So around 1992-3, Harshad Mehta was found to have duped the stock market, or was found to have taken to what is described as insider trading, and he was found to have been backed by, in an illegal way, by State Bank, similar to what has been happening with Nirav Modi and Choksi's and company, by also the stock exchanges and the heads of stock exchanges, and by Unit Trust of India. All this is called insider trading. Nobody is sure about what kind of loss Harshad Mehta caused. But when it all came out, Parliament appointed a high power committee known as Mirdha, Ram Nivas Mirdha Committee. It's a legislative committee. And high power, the term high power would mean this committee will have all the powers to summon anybody, to accuse anybody, to call for any document or any file, and accordingly sentence, and the sentence will have to be carried out. All this is there once the word high power committee is used. So Ram Nivas Mirdha Committee was a high power committee. It's a sad fact that nothing happened about Harshad Mehta scam, and eventually he died of sooner rather than later. The figure spoken was to the tune of 64,000 crores. And now with all Nirav Modis and Choksis and all, the action may be on, but should the Parliament in its authority find it proper, there is every possibility for a demand for a high power committee to be appointed. So various legislative committees also. Among the legislative procedure that we glimpsed yesterday, there are some specific ideas or concepts that I am required to pass on to you. We will complete those specific ideas and then go on to remaining part of the executive. One is what is called as the cut motion. Cut motion. As far as various bills are concerned, and yesterday we saw the procedure how a bill is passed in a house. Any member can draft and present a bill. If it is not presented by government, then it is called the private member bill. It's a private member bill, which also can be introduced. Whether it is to be admitted or not will be decided by the Speaker. If and when admitted, whether it is to be discussed and then when is it to be discussed will finally be decided by the Speaker with the help of Business Advisory Committee. Sometimes the government in power may agree with the basic point in that private member's bill. Then the concerned minister stands up and says, Mr. Speaker, sir, we accept the point and assure you that government will draft a law and bring it to the House. So we request the private member to withdraw his or her bill. This is how it goes on. But the money bills are the things, some private bill, even if it is put to vote, even if it is passed, the government will not collapse. There are many other methods of functioning. It's not like the government will immediately collapse. But a money bill, when a bill is defined as a money bill, and when put to vote, government party in power is not able to garner enough votes. Okay? If failure of the money bill to be passed amounts to no confidence motion against the government, and the government will collapse that very minute. Then it is also not like the full budget has to be rejected. Then now this is the provision for cut motion, Kapat Suchana. That any member, when the budget is being discussed, can come up and say that government has allotted like 1 crore rupees for a particular scheme, and I think it is unnecessarily high expenditure. The same work with a better quality can be done with 30 lakh rupees. So I submit a resolution that reduce this budgetary provision from 1 crore to 30 lakh. This is called cut motion. Cut motion. Cut the expenditure. This is called cut motion. If the cut motion is approved, the government is considered to have collapsed. Passage of a cut motion means no confidence motion has been passed. So the cut motion is not only about the member studying the budget and suggesting rescheduling of the funds, etc. If that is to be sincerely done, and if a member genuinely makes a suggestion that, Mr. Speaker, sir, the government seems to be buying like booster pumps for 229 rupees when they are available in the market for 8 rupees. And I'm ready to buy for them for 8 rupees. So this is cut motion. And then if the finance minister stands up and says that we accept the contention of distinguished member so and so, and we will accordingly suitably modify the... There is no cut motion and there is no voting. Once the point is accepted, there is no voting separately. But cut motion is more of a legislative tool rather than a financial instrument actually. It is not necessarily meant to be like recasting the budget, etc. Those discussions do happen. There is a very elaborate procedure of preparing the budgets wherein the opinions and the feelings of all members are already taken into consideration and articulated in the budget. But once the budget speech is presented, that is the presentation of the budget. It's not passed the same day. If you have ever heard the finance minister speak and waited till the last sentence, he closes by saying that I now present this bill before this house. Then for about another month, department-wise and chapter-wise discussions take place. And partial budget gets passed every day. Then is the last day. Something that happened last week, that in the parliament, Lok Sabha, there was all din going on, and in that all shor sharaba, the speaker got the budget passed, and it will go into action from 1st of April. If during that process, any member brings in a cut motion of even 1 rupee, which is done sometimes, 1 rupee, that you have allotted 10,000 crores for rural upliftment, and this is too much of expenditure. You don't need 10,000 crores for rural upliftment. Mr. Speaker, sir, I assure you that this can be done in 9 crore 99 lakh 99,999 rupees. So it's a cut motion of 1 rupee. Okay. But if that 1 rupee cut motion also is passed, then it means no confidence motion has been passed. So cut motion is used as a strategic tool. Then there is summoning of a session. Indian Constitution lays down that there have to be at least 3 sessions in a year. It also lays down that no 2 sessions will have a gap of more than 180 days. Therefore, the Constitution also creates this concept of ordinance, which is an executive power, a legislative power temporarily handed over to executive. Because the House may not be in session every time. But executive is there, permanent. It's functioning on day-to-day basis. So should a situation come up where passing of a new law is required, then there is a provision for an urgent session also to be called. So that can be done. Members can ask the speaker to call an urgent session. But sometimes even that may not be possible. Sometimes that may not be required. That the next session scheduled may be like 2, 3, 4 months away. Therefore, the power of ordinance, that is the executive, can get the law passed with the prior signature of the president. That is ordinance. And then all such ordinances have to be passed by the requisite house within 180 days from the date on which the president or respectively governor at the state level signed. If that doesn't happen, the ordinance lapses automatically, or there is no other resolution required, etc. So the provision for ordinance is actually a legislative power temporarily entrusted to executive in the interest of running the affairs of the country. When we go into the details of the provisions for ordinances, unfortunately we will see that they have been misused sometimes, because once there is a power, there is a tendency to misuse. Right during the very first parliament, the speaker had expressed displeasure over government's repeated use of ordinances. The speaker said it's as if that the government is waiting for the session to be over and then start the procedure of ordinances. This is bypassing the legislature. So ordinances are exceptions, not the rules. Unfortunately, sometimes later on, ordinances have been misused. Then the House is summoned. There have to be 3 sessions. Normally in Indian setup, the 3 sessions come to be respectively called as the budget session, the summer session, there is also a monsoon session, and there could be a winter session. So 3 or sometimes like 4 sessions in a year. First session in a calendar year always starts with an address by the president or the governor, respectively at union and state level. Rashtrapatinche Abhibhashan. That speech is supposed to be the report of the functioning of his or her, that is president's government, for the preceding year. And also the statement of objectives that his government would like to achieve in the upcoming year. It's not a personal speech. It's on behalf of the government. But the first session in the calendar year starts with the joint seating, and it is addressed by respectively the president and the governor. And then there is this provision for various types of adjournments. Pude dhakalne. The house can be adjourned for like 15 minutes, 4 hours, for rest of the day. And finally, when the session comes to an end, then it is adjourned sine die, or a very correct constitutional term that is used is prorogue, to prorogue the house. Prorogue means postpone without dissolving the house. There is dissolution. When the tenure is over, if the lower houses have a 5-year tenure, and as per the constitutional provision, the tenure is about to be over, then that last declaration in the legislature is dissolution, that the house is dissolved. Short of all that, whenever the session is to be over and the next session dates are announced and it is scheduled for a particular date, then there is adjournment motion, which is like sanctioned, and then the speaker declares that the house is prorogued. Prorogue means deferring without dissolving. That the functioning of the house is now deferred to the next future date, but the house is not dissolved, so the term prorogue. Now this is, all of it is where there is no confidence motion, I have already stated. And yesterday I have already stated, during last 2 days, that our constitution doesn't have a provision for confidence motion. This has come about as a precedent. And the heads of state can have this kind of power, that they may pick up some leader because they are satisfied that this leader either enjoys the confidence of the house or is most likely to enjoy the confidence of the house, and then give a time limit for that leader to call the session for only one purpose, that is to get the Vishwas Darshak Prastav, the vote of confidence. But also please remember, there is no formal explicit provision for confidence motion. It has come to be. Going by the constitution, there could be 2 choices. The president or governor respectively can actually ask the house first of all to come together, decide your leader, and once the house picks up the leader, then president or governor respectively can according to me, should issue an invitation for that leader to form the government. But going by the tradition in Indian democracy, this has not been done. What is generally done is the president or governor waits for of course, the elections. If there is a clear result, their job is cut out and very simple. But if there is what is called as hung house assembly or hung parliament with no clear majority, if there are alliances, then all kinds of factors come into picture. In fact, our heads of state, that is president and governors at the state level, they have insisted on a parade and the leaders to prove that they have majority. Actually, going by the strict provisions in the constitution, they are not supposed to do all this. They are not supposed to play this role. Their role is the role of umpire. The president or governor are not supposed to be one player in the game. The elected representatives are the players. So like I'm saying, even my choice would be always the first choice. That is, ask the house to come together, pick your leader. That act of the house deciding their leader itself will amount to vote of confidence. And then president or governor will issue an invitation for that particular leader to form the house. I think this will be more, it will contribute to political stability, and this will reduce horse trading, Ghode Bazar. That some leader in the minority, but president or governor in their wise conclusion think that this leader either enjoys or is likely to enjoy the confidence of the house, calls that leader and asks him to form the government and then get the confidence vote passed by the very act of placing that person and his political outfit in the position of power. A tremendous power for patronage is entrusted to that leader. Once he is there as Prime Minister or Chief Minister, he can manipulate and manage and ensure that he is able to garner, because power has great patronage. And once you are there, this will encourage horse trading. I have specifically picked up two examples, and some of you are already reacting like fundamental rights will come up in the last part of 21st century. Because actually it so happens that with about 10 minutes to go to 4, I am about to conclude the legislature part finally. And this was a glimpse, mind you. So many points about the executive, and then we start with fundamental rights and directive principles. So it's very obvious, it's almost obvious that that's going to be beginning with March 28. But don't worry, your fundamental rights are secure until March 28. And don't worry, you have nothing to do with respect to directive principles of state administration. But I have picked up two examples to now elucidate and explain all this. One is what happened in Maharashtra, A, in March 1995, and B, in October 1999. In the elections for Vidhan Sabha in Maharashtra, the sitting government was the Congress government. That Congress government had come to power in 1990 with 141 seats in a house of 288. So it still fell short by 4 seats. 11 independent candidates submitted a written say to governor saying that we back Congress, which means Congress tally went to 152. Therefore, governor invited Congress to form the government. 1990, it was a Congress government. Initially, Sudhakar Rao Naik. Then after a very tragic and a time period full of turmoil for Maharashtra and all India, the year was 1993, Sharad Pawar was sent to the state as Chief Minister, otherwise he was Defence Minister there. And in 1991, I'm expecting you to remember that after Rajiv Gandhi's assassination, on May 21, 1991, Sharad Pawar did try to become the Prime Minister. His bid failed. He was the Defence Minister then and had to come to the state in 1990. All years full of tremendous turmoil. And it's on this background sorry, that the elections of March 95 happened. Beginning with 1990, Shiva Sena and BJP had come together to pose a formidable challenge to Congress. And then in March 1995, Shiva Sena, BJP together got 138 seats in a House of 288. Still falling short by 7 seats. And Congress had some 89 or 90 seats. I'm expecting you to remember that Congress was still unified. There was no national NCP. NCP was formally founded on June 10, 1999. So the governor Alexander had to make a decision about now who should be called first to form the government. In March 1995, Governor P.C. Alexander, who was a very upright and one of the best ICS officers that India has ever had, he originally hails from Tamil Nadu. He was one of the most trusted officers of Indira Gandhi herself, and not because P.C. Alexander was her sycophant, but because he was not Indira Ji's sycophant. He was very straightforward, and whatever advice is to be given, and as Prime Minister, she had ensured that she had such coterie of officers around her, not sycophants, but those who would state very plainly whatever, and they won't be scared to state so. P.C. Alexander was governor of Maharashtra after his tenure as an officer was over. In March 1995, he made a choice of issuing the first invitation to the leader of Shiva Sena BJP combined. Actually, it so happens that Congress still had 89 seats, and even Sharad Pawar at that point of time did indeed argue that Congress is still the largest single party, so he should be given the first chance to form the government. He said, give me the chance to form the government and give me time limit to prove my majority. I will prove it. That everybody believed. That anybody who understands a wee bit of politics, that once you allow Sharad Pawar to form a government in a House of 288, even if he forms a government with 89 MLAs on his side, he knows how to go from 89 to 145. He actually knows how to remain in the picture of a possible Prime Minister with only 8 MPs on his side. And as of now, 4 really. 4, out of which Udayan Raje cares 2 hoods for Sharad Pawar. But he did claim that Congress is still the largest single party because Shiva Sena had 72 seats and BJP had 66. Their tally together was 138. But P.C. Alexander used 2 criteria and rejected Congress's claim. Number 1 was, you were sitting government in the dissolved house and people have reduced your seats. People brought you from 141 to like 89 or something. So he said, my interpretation is that you don't have the mandate to form the government. People have rejected you. If people wanted you to form the government, they would have at least given you 141 seats or more after having ruled for 5 years. Criteria number 1. And he used the second one as criteria, that was pre-election alliance. He has really created a very fine precedent in Indian democracy. He said Shiva Sena BJP alliance is a pre-election alliance, not a convenient marriage of convenience like in form of a post-election alliance. He said that Shiva Sena BJP went to people on a common manifesto, shared the seats, and in not one of 288 seats did a Shiva Sena BJP candidate fight with each other. So he interpreted that this is people's mandate, and as far as my decision is concerned, I will think of them as one group on the floor of the assembly. So they are 138. So yes, they fall short by 7 seats, but my first invitation. And then as a rule for alliance politics, Shiva Sena BJP had decided that whichever party gets more number of seats, their leader will be the chief minister. Therefore, the other party's leader will be deputy chief minister. Now, Shiva Sena had 72 then. So Shiva Sena picked up Manohar Joshi, while initially it was Sudhir Joshi who had been picked up. But again, the intra-party politicking happened, where again I have reason to suspect that Sharad Pawar had a major role to play. But finally, Shiva Sena confirmed Manohar Joshi's name, and BJP took up Gopinath Munde as their leader of the house, and therefore he became deputy chief minister. Manohar Joshi was invited by P.C. Alexander to form the government. He has created a very good precedent for legislative practices. Then the same P.C. Alexander was required to confront another challenge in 1999, October 1999. Maharashtra Assembly actually had no reason to go to elections. The life of Maharashtra Assembly was till March 2000. And Shiva Sena BJP government could have waited. But by October 1999, there was a general factor about goodwill towards Atal Bihari Vajpayee as the leader of NDA. Although his government, which is going to be the last story for the day, and I'm not sure the watch is going to permit me, I might still make a decision of reserving even that story, then executive, and then sometime before 31st of December 2100. I reserve my right to start with fundamental rights and directive principles. So, Shiva Sena BJP thought that this is the right time. And as per the constitutional provision, the House can be dissolved and elections can be conducted any time during last 6 months. So, the leader of the House has that authority to request the dissolution and accordingly go to elections. So, the Shiva Sena BJP combined here decided to dissolve assembly and go to elections. That is because they were still together, but then Congress split. And NCP came to be established on 10th of June 1999. So the political thinking at state level was this general sense of goodwill and respect towards Atal Bihari Vajpayee will also benefit the state government. Sena BJP will win and come back to power for another 5 years. So elections happened, October 1999. And they were simultaneous elections, mind you. I have always said how wise I attribute it to the wisdom of our voter. Maharashtra voters gave considerable majority to Shiva Sena BJP in the parliamentary election from Maharashtra. Now, allow me on my feet not to remember the exact figure, but it was certainly more than 50% plus one from Maharashtra. Maharashtra has 48 seats in the in Lok Sabha. Allow me not to remember the exact figure, but it was like more than 26 or something. So in a way, as far as Maharashtra is concerned, majority for BJP Shiv Sena, okay? But Maharashtra voter did not give any, did not allow even Shiv Sena BJP to come anywhere close to majority. Shiva Sena BJP combined tally fell to 95 from 138. And Congress and NCP had been split. They went to elections on separate manifesto. And in all 288 constituencies, every single one had a Congress and NCP candidate fighting with each other. When the results came out, Shiva Sena BJP combined tally had fallen to 95. And both Congress and NCP were still less, each one separate, they were less than 95. So less that in fact, Congress plus NCP also were not close to 145. They still needed support from somebody else. And so there was a problem. Now this time, Shiva Sena BJP claimed that they should get the first opportunity to form the government and a time limit to get the confidence vote passed. P.C. Alexander chose not to do so. Because among two criteria, remember the first one. You were sitting government. You had 138 seats. People have reduced you from 138 to 95. So as governor, P.C. Alexander's interpretation was that you don't have the mandate to form government. That doesn't mean people have given anybody, Congress, NCP or Shekapa, etc., mandate to form the government. Alexander chose to wait. Maharashtra did not have an elected government for about 6 weeks because Congress, NCP were still not talking about alliance. Sharad Pawar's reason for quitting Congress was Sonia Gandhi's foreign nationality. And like within less than 5 months, come on, Sharad Pawar can convince anything to anybody. But even he needs some time. That is barely less than 4 months ago that you made an issue out of Sonia Gandhi's foreign nationality and now you suddenly form alliance again with Congress. So yes, he also needed some little time. After 6 weeks, Congress, NCP and many other self-styled secular outfits decided to finally come together to keep the communal forces away from power. So somehow the tally crossed 145 and then Alexander issued the invitation. Vilasrao Deshmukh became the chief minister at that point of time. Democracy is government by debate. And with all our attendant problems, the way it works out is all beautiful. You will notice that I have not, we don't have the time to discuss another great example at the parliament level. So enjoy for like 10 days. Go on studying also if you can. So that I hope we enjoy even further when we start meeting again on March 28. But on March 28, I'm going to start with the example in the parliament, then continue with executive. I hope we are able to like deal with constitution during the sessions we have planned.